Is there any curse more painful than being treated like an enemy by the very child you love on a sun-drenched afternoon? A mother was cursed by her own daughter-in-law, "You're a leech, get out of here," and her son, instead of defending her, chose to silently turn away. When a mother's love is publicly trampled upon, what kind of fire can possibly rise from the ashes of that betrayal? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Give this story a like if it moved you. And I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching in. The Closed Door. My name is Imani Washington. I am 72 years old. For 35 of those years, I was the head nurse at Charleston General. I've seen life come into this world, and I've held hands with it as it slipped away. I thought I had seen everything. I thought that after raising a son, seeing him successful, my life was complete. A job well done. But then came a day that taught me some things. No matter how freely you give them, are not always given back. And on that day, standing on the porch of the house I built with my own sweat and savings, my daughter-in-law looked right through me and screamed, "No space for you. Why is that old leech here?" The words did not just hang in the humid South Carolina air. They slapped me, a physical blow that left my ears ringing. There she was, Tasha, framed in the doorway of my house. My house. Her arms were crossed. Her face a mask of contempt. Behind her, blurred but present, was my son. My Andy. He did not meet my eyes. I had arrived at Folly Beach that Friday morning, just as I always did on the first weekend of the month. The drive from the city was familiar. A quiet ritual. I looked forward to the smell of the salt marsh, the cry of the gulls, the peace that settled deep in my bones the moment I crossed the bridge. I expected silence. I expected the soft click of my key in the lock. Instead, I found chaos. 3 cars I didn't recognize were parked in my gravel driveway, blocking my usual spot under the old oak tree. Loud music, the kind with a bass that rattles your teeth, pulsed from my living room windows. The air, which should have smelled of sea salt and honeysuckle, was thick with the scent of burnt barbecue and cheap beer. My porch, my beautiful wraparound porch, was a battlefield. Wet towels dripped onto the floorboards I had stained myself. Dirty clothes were piled on the wicker chairs James and I had picked out together so long ago. My red geraniums, the ones I talked to every morning, were crushed. One pot was overturned, its dark soil spilling out like a wound. And then Tasha saw me. There was no shame in her eyes, no surprise. Only annoyance, as if I were a stray cat that had wandered onto her property. "Tasha," I managed to say, my voice a stranger in my own throat. The car keys trembled in my hand. I didn't know you were here," she laughed. A short, sharp sound, utterly without warmth. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Marcus said we could use the house. We needed a break. Unlike some people, we actually have stressful jobs." More faces appeared behind her. Her sister, with 2 teenagers I barely knew. Her mother, who looked me up and down as if inspecting faulty goods. They all stared at me, not as a guest, but as an interruption, an inconvenience. Where was Marcus? My son had to be here. He would explain this terrible misunderstanding. "Andy," I called out, my voice thin. He finally stepped forward, but only a little. He still wouldn't look at me. He just mumbled something. I couldn't hear it over the music. "Look, Imani," Tasha said, using my first name in that way that was meant to sound modern but always felt like a dismissal. "There's just no room. The guest rooms are taken. The kids are on air mattresses in the living room. Your presence will just create tension." Frozen. I was frozen to the spot. She was actually kicking me out of my own house. The house I built, the house that held every memory of my husband, every scraped knee of my son, every quiet prayer I had ever whispered. "This is my house." "Tasha," I said. The words felt heavy, clumsy. "I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. The deed is in my name." Always the same story. She cut in, her voice rising. Asterisk, my times house. Asterisk, my times money. Isn't Marcus your son? What's yours is his. And what's his is mine. That's how normal families work. The music seemed to stop. Everyone was watching, judging. My cheeks burned with a humiliation I hadn't felt since I was a little girl who had spilled juice on the church carpet. But something inside me, a stubborn, quiet thing, refused to break. I took a slow breath. I looked past Tasha, past the strangers on my porch, and I let my mind drift back 20 years. To a vacant lot full of weeds and dreams. I was 50 then, a new widow. It was just me and Andy against the world. I remembered standing on that empty patch of land, my nursing shoes sinking into the soft dirt. The bank book clutched in my hand. It held $45,000, every single penny saved from double shifts, from meals skipped, from dresses I never bought myself. I remembered James, my husband, lying in his hospital bed, his breath shallow. He had whispered, "Imani, my love, we're building more than a house. We're building a legacy." And I had believed him. Asterisk, asterisk. A legacy built not just on wood and nails, but on sweat, sacrifice, and a promise to always have a place for our family. Andy was with me the day the construction started. His eyes shone as he watched the foundation being poured. "Mom," he had said, throwing his arms around my waist, "you're the strongest woman I know." How did that boy become the man standing silently behind his wife, allowing her to treat me like trash? The memory gave me a strange kind of strength. I looked back at Tasha. My trembling stopped. My voice, when I spoke, was quiet, but it was clear. "I see," I said. "I understand the situation perfectly." She smiled. A smug, triumphant little smile. She thought she had won. They all did. They had no idea what they had just started. Echoes in an empty room. There's a motel just off the main road to Folly Beach. The Sandpiper Inn. The sign has a faded painting of a bird, and 2 of the letters in its name don't light up at night. It costs $85 a night. Money I hadn't planned on spending. I was supposed to be sleeping in my own bed tonight. The room smelled of bleach and something else, something sad. The air conditioner rattled like a box of old bones. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged under my weight, the springs groaning in protest. At my house, from my bedroom, you can hear the ocean if you listen closely. A soft, steady rhythm. The sound of forever. Here. All I could hear was the hum of the ice machine down the hall and the sound of my own breathing. It sounded old. Humiliation is a cold companion. It sits with you in the dark and whispers all the things you've tried to forget. I stared at the floral bedspread, a pattern of faded pink roses, and I tried to diagnose what had happened, like I was a nurse again, looking at a patient's chart, trying to find the origin of the sickness. Where did this begin? My mind went to Tasha. I remembered the first time Marcus brought her home. She was sharp. You could see that right away. A real estate agent, full of ambition. Her eyes were always moving, sizing things up, valuing them. She was polite. Of course, she called me Mrs. Washington. She brought a sweet potato pie to dinner, a store-bought pie, not homemade, but still, a gesture. She loved the beach house. At first, "Oh, Mrs. Washington, it's just beautiful," she would say. "You must be so proud." But over the years, her compliments began to change. They started to have an edge. "It's a shame this big house sits empty most of the time," she said once. "Last summer, we were sitting on the porch, drinking sweet tea. Such a waste. A waste." I remember the word stuck in my throat, like a fishbone. My 35 years of double shifts, a waste, my James's dream, a waste. I didn't say anything. I just stirred my tea. It's a habit of mine. When I don't know what to say, I stir my tea. And what about Marcus, my Andy? The silence from him today was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I tried to remember our last phone call. Just last week, his voice had a strange note in it, an anxiety I couldn't place. He had asked, "Mom, did you remember to pay the water bill for the beach house? It's due on the 15th. "Of course, baby," I had told him, a little annoyed. "I've been paying my own bills for 72 years. I think I've got the hang of it." I thought he was just being overprotective. His father was the same way. But now, sitting in this cold, lonely room, I wondered, did I pay it? I was sure I did. Almost sure. My memory, it isn't what it used to be. It's not a surgeon's scalpel anymore. More like a butter knife. It still works. Most of the time. But the edges are dull. My thoughts drifted further back. To James. To the money. I had always told the story that I built the house with my savings alone. It was my story. The story of the strong widow. But that wasn't the whole truth. Was it? I remember James. In his final days, he had pulled me close. His voice was a whisper. Thin as paper. Imani? He had said. My life insurance. I'm leaving you a piece of it. To finish our dream. I had used that money. A good portion of it. I had forgotten that part. Or maybe I had chosen to forget. It made my story better. Cleaner. But it wasn't the whole truth. Perhaps the house belonged to him more than I ever admitted. Perhaps Marcus felt that, too. I laid down on the squeaking bed and closed my eyes. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. Now was the time for thinking, for diagnosing. Because a sickness had taken root in my family, and I knew, with the certainty of a head nurse who has seen 1,000 fevers break, that if I didn't find the cause, it would consume us all. The quiet fury, sleep did not come to me in that motel room. How could it? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tasha's sneer. I heard the echo of her words. Asterisk, old leech. Asterisk. The quiet fury began to build in my soul. It wasn't a hot, screaming anger. No, this was different. It was a cold anger. A still anger. The kind a nurse feels when she sees a disease and knows, with absolute certainty, that it must be cut out. By morning, the hurt had hardened into a plan. I showered, dressed in my Sunday clothes, and practiced my smile in the cracked mirror. It was a weak thing, but it would have to do. I drove back to my house. The music was still playing, though not as loudly. I walked up the steps, my heart a steady term and drum against my ribs. Tasha was on the porch, sipping coffee from one of my favorite mugs, the one with the little blue heron painted on it. She looked surprised to see me, annoyed. I'm sorry to bother you again, dear, I said, my voice soft, but dead-eyed, gentle. The voice I used with frightened patience. I realized I left my old family Bible here, and my blood pressure medication. My doctor would have a fit if I missed a dose. It was a small lie, but a believable one. Tasha hesitated. She looked me over, searching for a fight, but all she saw was a harmless old woman in a church dress. She thought she had broken me yesterday. She thought I was here to beg. Fine, she sighed, rolling her eyes. But be quick. We're having a barbecue later. She let me in, but she didn't follow me. She was too busy, too important. Her mistake. The moment I was inside, the calm exterior I had built around myself fell away. My home, my beautiful home, it smelled of stale beer and strange perfume. The living room was a disaster zone of deflated air mattresses and scattered clothes. My hand-sewn curtains were stained with something dark. Ketchup. Maybe. I took out my phone. My hands were steady now. Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. A picture of the living room. Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. A picture of the kitchen sink, overflowing with greasy dishes. My good pot, the heavy cast iron one I used for my gumbo, was sitting on the stove. A black, burnt crust lining the bottom. My heart ached. That pot had cooked more family meals than Tasha had ever eaten. Asterisk. Click. They were all out back. On the deck, I could hear their loud laughter. The sizzle of the grill. My grill. I moved quietly. A ghost in my own house. I went upstairs. The guest rooms were chaos, but it was my bedroom, my sanctuary, that truly stopped my breath. Tasha's mother was using it. Her clothes were spilling out of my closet. Her makeup was spread all over my vanity. And my bed, where James had taken his last breath, had been stripped of my quilt. Instead, there were cheap, leopard print sheets. Someone had been smoking in here. The smell clung to the air like a shroud. Asterisk. Click. 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 Then I saw it, tucked under the corner of the mattress, as if hidden in a hurry, was a thick manila folder. It didn't belong to me. My name was on the tab, typed neatly. Beatrice Holloway. No. My name was Imani Washington. Who was Beatrice Holloway? Then I realized they had used my maiden name. A cold dread, colder than any anger, washed over me. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were official-looking documents, legal papers. I put on the reading glasses I always kept in my purse. The words swam into focus. Asterisk petition for transfer of property. My eyes scanned the page. My nurse's training kicking in. Looking for the diagnosis. The reason. And then I found it. Asterisk. Due to the deteriorating cognitive state of the owner. 1. Beatrice Imani Washington. Deteriorating cognitive state. The words were a clinical, sterile knife. Twisting in my gut. They weren't just taking my house. They were taking my mind. My sanity. Beneath that was another paper. A medical report. It was signed by a doctor I had never heard of. Dr. Alan Reed. It listed symptoms. Memory loss. Confusion. Poor judgment. It concluded with a diagnosis. Typed in bold letters. Senile dementia. A lie. A monstrous, calculated lie. I had spent my life caring for patients with dementia. I knew its cruel realities. To have that label slapped on me, as a tool to steal what was mine, it was a violation deeper than any theft. I kept digging. There was a property appraisal. My house, my sanctuary, was valued at $300,000, and tucked at the very back, on a piece of notebook paper, was a handwritten note. I knew Tasha's handwriting. I had seen it on 100 birthday cards. Asterisk. With this, we can finally get the bigger apartment in the city, and the kids can go to that private school. We just need Marcus to sign. And for the old woman not to make trouble. The old woman, that's all I was to them. An obstacle, a problem to be managed. Not a mother, not a grandmother, just the old woman. I put everything back in the folder. I slipped it into my large church purse. This was the evidence. This was the disease. Laid bare on a slide. It wasn't a spontaneous invasion. It was a planned, cold-blooded conspiracy. I left the room. I walked down the stairs. Each step, a conscious effort. I could hear them on the deck, laughing, celebrating their victory. My son's voice was among them. I walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. Tasha didn't even look up. I sat in my car for a long time. The engine off. The folder, heavy as a tombstone, on the seat beside me. I sat there, on the edge of my own property, feeling the ground beneath me crumble away. They did not just want to take my house. They wanted to take my name, my memory, my very self. Have you ever been betrayed so completely that it feels like you can't draw a full breath? Have you ever looked at the face of someone you love and seen a stranger looking back? Asterisk, asterisk. If you are still listening, please do me a kindness and comment with the number 1 below. It would mean the world to me to know that I am not alone on this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement for me to tell the final parts of this story. The advisor. There comes a time, after the shock wears off, when you have to decide what to do next. You can stay curled up in a ball of hurt, or you can stand up. I've never been one for curling up. I didn't go to one of those big law firms downtown. The kind with glass walls and fancy leather chairs that cost more than my first car. That's not my world. My world is built on relationships, on trust. So, I called David Chen. I've known David since he was a boy with scraped knees and a mischievous grin. His mother, Eleanor Chen, was one of the best surgical nurses I ever worked with. We stood side by side through countless long nights and saved more lives than I can remember. I trusted Eleanor with my life. I figured I could trust her son with my house. David's office is a small, tidy space above a bakery on King Street. It smells faintly of sugar and coffee. He doesn't look like a lawyer from the movies. He's young, wears simple shirts, and has the same kind, intelligent eyes as his mother. He listened to my whole story without interrupting once. He just sat there, making quiet notes on a yellow legal pad. I placed the envelope on his desk. The photographs from my phone, the copy of the deed, and the last thing, the document Tasha had hidden, the one that tried to steal my mind. He read it carefully, his face growing serious. When he looked up, the kindness in his eyes had been joined by a hard, protective edge. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice calm and steady. "This is ugly. The trespassing is one thing, but this document," he tapped the paper with his finger. "This is fraud. It's a criminal offense." A small flicker of hope ignited in my chest. It wasn't just a family squabble. It wasn't just me being an overly sensitive old woman. It was real. It was wrong. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do we call the police? Can we get them out of there today?" David leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "This is where we need to be smart, not just fast," he explained. "The law doesn't work like on television. We can't just show up with a sheriff and throw them out in 2 hours. That's not how it's done, especially when family is involved." He picked up his pen and started to sketch out a plan on his notepad. His handwriting was neat, precise, just like his mother's charting. "Here's the plan," he said. "Step 1, we send them a formal notice to quit. It's a legal document that gives them 30 days to vacate the property. It's the proper, legal way. It shows that we are being reasonable. 30 days, an entire month. The thought of them living in my house, sleeping in my bed, for another 30 days made my stomach clench. But I nodded. I trusted him. "Step 2, he continued. "If they ignore the notice, and I suspect they will, we file for a formal eviction with the court. A judge will order them out. That order is enforceable by law enforcement. And the other thing," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "the paper about my mind. That's step 3. Once we have the house secured, we report the fraudulent document to the district attorney. We let the criminal justice system handle that. But we do this one step at a time. We build our case on solid ground." He laid it all out so clearly. A path through the darkness. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Then, he looked at me, his expression softening. "Mrs. Washington, Imani," he said gently, "I have to ask you a difficult question. When we go to court, they will fight back. They will use that document. They will try to prove that you are confused. They will question your memory, your finances, your decisions. Are you prepared to have your private life examined like that?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. He was asking the very thing I had been asking myself in that cold motel room. He was asking me to face the butter knife, my dulling memory. I looked down at my hands. These hands had held newborn. They had comforted the dying. They had worked tirelessly for 72 years. They were wrinkled, and some days they ached. But they were still strong. I looked back up at David. I met his gaze. My memory may not be a surgeon's scalpel anymore. "David," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "but my dignity is still intact. I am ready." He nodded, a slow, respectful smile touching his lips. "I thought you might say that," he said. "Let's get to work." I walked out of his office and back into the Charleston sunshine. The air didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. I had an advisor. I had a plan. I had a war to fight. And for the first time, I felt like I might just win. 30 days of silence. The lawyer, David Chen, sent the papers. A registered letter, crisp, official, and cold. It gave them 30 days to vacate my home. And then there was silence. A silence so loud, so heavy. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on me in that small motel room. 30 days. You might think that time would be filled with rage, with pacing the floor and crying into my pillow. There was some of that in the beginning, but a nurse, you see, is trained for waiting. We wait for fevers to break. We wait for test results to come back. We wait for healing, which always takes its own sweet time. I knew how to wait. The silence from Marcus was the hardest part. Not a call, not a text message, nothing. That silence hurt more than Tasha's screaming. Her anger was a storm, loud and violent. But it passed. His silence was a drought. It dried up something vital inside me, day by day. But I would not let it turn my heart to dust. I decided that I would not spend those 30 days as a victim. I would spend them as Imani Washington. So I began to build a routine, a fortress of small, deliberate actions against the chaos. Every morning, I woke up at 6. I walked down to the shore, not my shore, but a public beach nearby. I would take off my shoes and let the cool, wet sand squish between my toes. I watched the sun rise over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I prayed, not for victory, not for revenge. I prayed for strength, the kind of strength that is quiet and deep and does not need to announce itself. After my walk, I would go to a little diner for breakfast. I sat at the same booth every day. After a week, the waitress knew my order. 2 eggs over easy, grits, and a side of bacon. Extra crispy. Those small connections, they became my lifeline. A friendly nod, a warm cup of coffee. They reminded me that the world was bigger than my pain. On Sundays, I went to church. My church. The First Baptist Church on Meeting Street, where my mother and her mother had worshipped. I sat in my usual pew. My friends, the women I called my prayer warriors, gathered around me. Sarah, Dolores, Martha. They had known me my whole life. They didn't need me to explain the details. They saw the weariness in my eyes, the slump in my shoulders. They didn't offer advice. They just sat with me. They held my hand during the hymns. Their presence was a silent amen, a testament that I was not, and never would be, alone. It was Sarah who gave me the idea. Imani, she said, her voice gentle as old velvet. You've always had such a good memory. Write it all down. Don't let them take that from you too. So I bought a simple notebook, a spiral-bound one from the pharmacy, and I began to write. At first, I just wrote down the events of the day, what I ate, who I talked to, a way to prove to myself that the day had happened, that times I asterisk had happened. But then, I started writing down memories. The day Marcus took his first steps on the rug in our old apartment. The taste of the sweet potato pie James loved so much. I wrote to fight back against the label they had tried to put on me. Asterisk, dementia. Asterisk, I wrote, to reclaim my own story. I also went to the bank. I sat down with the manager, a nice young man who called me Mrs. Washington. I had him print out all my account statements. I took them back to my room and spread them out on the bed. I organized them. I put them in a new folder. I looked at the numbers. The steady accumulation of a lifetime of work. This was my life. In black and white. Tangible. Real. I reviewed my will. I made sure everything was in order. I was taking back control. Paper by paper. Dollar by dollar. The days passed. One by one. The anger was still there. A cold stone in the pit of my stomach. But around it, something else was growing. A quiet resolve. A sense of peace that came not from a lack of trouble, but from facing it head on. Then, on the 28th day, my phone rang. It was him, Marcus. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time. My heart started that old, familiar rhythm of a mother's hope. Maybe he was sorry. Maybe he would fix this. I answered. My hand was shaking. Hello, Marcus, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear his breathing. Mom, he said. His voice was strained, hesitant. We need to talk. This has all been a misunderstanding. It's not what you think. A misunderstanding. That's what he called it. The lies, the forged papers, the cruelty. My hope, that foolish, stubborn thing, withered and died. I took a breath. I looked out the motel window at the setting sun. It is too late for talking. Marcus, I said, and the calmness in my own voice surprised me. From now on, you can talk to my lawyer. And I hung up the phone. I sat there, my hand still resting on the receiver. It was trembling again, but my heart was still. The long, silent wait was over. The battle was about to begin, and I was ready. Before the bench, the 30 days passed. One by one, each morning I woke up in the motel, and the first thing I thought was, asterisk. They are still in my house. Asterisk. Each night I went to sleep, and the last thing I thought was, asterisk. They are sleeping in my bed. Asterisk. There was no phone call, no apology, only silence. A thick, heavy silence that felt louder than shouting. The courthouse in Charleston is an old building. The floors are made of cool, worn marble, and they echo with every footstep. It smells of old paper and dust. I wore my Sunday best. A simple navy blue dress. Sensible shoes. I felt like I was going to church. But I was not there to pray. I was there for a reckoning. David Chen was already waiting for me. Looking calm and professional in a dark suit, he gave me a reassuring nod. Ready? Imani, he asked. I simply nodded back. Words felt unnecessary. We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected. The wood was dark, polished by time. There were only a few people there. And then I saw them. Marcus and Tasha. They were sitting at a table across the room with a lawyer I didn't know. Tasha was dressed in a sharp pantsuit. Her hair pulled back tightly. She looked brittle, like a piece of glass that might shatter. And Marcus, my son, he looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He saw me. And for a fleeting second, his face changed. I saw the boy I raised, but then it was gone. He looked down at his hands, twisting a pen. He was a stranger to me. In that moment, they both were. Not my family. Just the defendants. Our case was called. We moved to the tables at the front. The judge was a woman with graying hair and glasses perched on her nose. She looked efficient. Their lawyer went first. He stood up and spoke in a smooth, confident voice. He called this a simple family misunderstanding. He said I had a history of being generous with the house. He claimed I had given Marcus a verbal agreement to use the property whenever he needed. A verbal agreement. The lie was so bald, so shameless. It almost took my breath away. I kept my face still. I stared straight ahead. I was a nurse on duty. Emotions had no place here. Then it was David's turn. He did not raise his voice. He was calm, methodical. He placed a folder on the judge's bench. Your Honor, he said, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a matter of property law. He presented the deed. My name, clear and undisputed. He presented a copy of the 30-day notice. Signed and delivered, and ignored. My client, Mrs. Washington, has owned this property outright for 20 years. David said, she has paid every bill, every tax, every repair. The defendants were asked to leave. They refused. It's as simple as that. Tasha's lawyer stood up again. My client and her husband were simply looking after the property for his mother. They were concerned about its upkeep. Concerned. The word hung in the sterile air. David walked back to our table and picked up another envelope. Regarding their concern for the property, Your Honor, he said, his voice now holding a cool, sharp edge, I would like to present these. He handed a set of photographs to the bailiff, who passed them up to the judge. They were the pictures I had taken on my phone, my crushed geraniums, the overflowing trash cans, the stains on my wicker chairs, the general chaos. The judge looked at each photo, her expression unreadable. Then she looked over her glasses, first at Tasha, then at Marcus. I heard a soft gasp from someone sitting behind me. Tasha's face flushed a deep, ugly red. She stared down at the table as if she could burn a hole through the wood. It was over quickly after that. The judge cleared her throat. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Imani Washington, she announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. A formal order of eviction is granted. The defendants have 72 hours to vacate the premises. 72 hours. The sound of the gavel felt like a gunshot in the quiet room. It was done. We all stood up. David put a steadying hand on my arm. As we turned to leave, Marcus moved towards me. His lawyer tried to stop him, but he brushed past. He stood right in front of me, close enough that I could see the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. Mom, he whispered. His voice was raw, pleading. I looked at him. My son, my Andy, the boy whose fevers I had cooled, whose tears I had dried. And I felt nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. Following David's advice, following the command of my own wounded pride, I turned my back on him. I walked out of the courtroom without a word, my sensible shoes echoing on the cold marble floor. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I had just amputated a part of my own body, and the phantom limb was already beginning to ache. Confession in the rain. The victory in the courtroom left a bitter taste in my mouth. It felt hollow. That night, a storm rolled in from the ocean, not a gentle shower, but a real Charleston tempest. The wind howled like a grieving widow, and the rain beat against the thin walls of my motel room. Each clap of thunder seemed to shake the very foundation of the building, and the foundation of me. I was trying to read my Bible, but the words wouldn't stay still on the page. They just blurred together. My mind kept drifting back to the courtroom, to Marcus's face, the way it crumpled when the judge's gavel fell, then a knock on the door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a frantic, desperate pounding that seemed to fight with the thunder outside. My heart leaped into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a foolish second, I thought maybe it was the police, with more bad news. I opened the door just a crack, and there he was, Marcus. He was soaked to the bone. Rain dripped from his hair, running down his face in streams that mixed with what might have been tears. He wasn't wearing his expensive architect's suit, just a wrinkled shirt and jeans. He looked lost, like the little boy who used to run to me whenever he scraped his knee. For a moment, all the anger vanished, replaced by a mother's instinct. I wanted to pull him inside, wrap him in a towel, make him a cup of hot tea. But then I remembered the courtroom, the silence, the humiliation. I kept my hand on the door. "What do you want?" "Marcus," I asked. The wind snatched my words away. "Please." "Mom," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just let me talk to you, please." Something in his eyes, a raw desperation I had never seen before, made me step aside. He stumbled in, dripping water all over the cheap carpet. I didn't offer him a towel. I just stood there, my arms crossed, waiting. The cold fortress was back up around my heart. "You have 5 minutes," I said. He stood in the middle of the room, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked around at the drab walls, the stained bedspread. "You've been living here," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "And that broke the dam. Where else was I supposed to live?" "Marcus," I said, and my voice, which had been so calm, so controlled, began to tremble with all the fury I had held back. "In my car, you and your wife took my home." "My home? Did you think about that when you were having your barbecue on my porch? Did you think about where your mother was sleeping while you were in my bed?" I couldn't stop. The words poured out, hot and bitter. "And that piece of paper, that lie times dementia. Asterisk. How could you? After all the years I spent caring for others, for your grandmother, you would use that word against me, as a weapon, to steal from me. How could you come Melijan?" "Andrew." I used his full name. I hadn't called him Andrew since he was a boy in trouble. He flinched as if I had struck him. He just stood there and took it, his head bowed. When I finally ran out of words, exhausted and breathless, he looked up. His face was a mess of rain and tears and a pain so deep it shocked me, because I was scared. "Mom," he choked out. I was so scared. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling with the screen. I didn't know how to talk to you. You're always so strong. You never need anyone." He showed me the phone. An email from the power company, a final notice for an unpaid bill. A bill for my city apartment. It was 2 months overdue. He showed me a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, asterisk, Imani. "Honey, are you okay? You left your front door wide open all night. You forgot to pay the power bill?" "Mom," he said, his voice ragged. "You left your door unlocked. Last month, when I called, you asked me 3 times about my daughter's piano recital, like it was the first time you were hearing it. I saw you trying to find your car in the church parking lot 2 weeks ago. I saw it, and all I could see was Grandma. In the end, signing papers for any salesman who knocked on her door, losing everything. The room was spinning. I didn't remember leaving the door open. The power bill. I thought I had paid it." He saw the confusion on my face. "And the house." "Mom," he continued, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. "The house, you don't even remember. Do you? Remember what that half the money to build it came from Dad's life insurance? I found the papers when I was clearing out his old desk. He left that money specifically for the house. It was his legacy too. I was terrified you'd get confused, that you'd sell it to some stranger for a fraction of what it's worth. I was scared of losing the last piece of him, of you." The air left my lungs. "The insurance money? James. Asterisk. I'm leaving you a part of me to finish our dream. Asterisk, his words. I had forgotten. Completely. It was all a blur. Tasha, he said, shaking his head. She saw how scared I was. Her solution was fast, easy. A lawyer she knew told her it was just a formality. A way to protect you, to protect the assets. I knew it was wrong. In my gut, I knew it. But I was a coward. I was a coward. Mom, I was too afraid to have the hard conversation. Too afraid to look my strong, perfect mother in the eye and say, Mom, I think you need help. So I let her do it. I let it happen. He finally broke down completely, sobbing like a child. Great. Heaving sobs that shook his entire body. The thunder outside cracked. A long, rolling boom that seemed to go on forever. The rain kept beating against the window. But inside that little room, there was only the sound of my son crying, and the sound of my own heart breaking into 1,000 tiny pieces. The truth, it turned out, was far colder and crueler than the rain. My son, he loved me, but his love, twisted by fear, had become a weapon that had wounded us both, perhaps beyond repair. If this story still speaks to your heart, please leave me a small sign in the comments, maybe a single word, an emoji, or even just a dot. Every little sign reminds me that I'm not telling this story into the void, but to kindred spirits who are walking beside me. Cleaning up the pieces. 3 days later, I came home. David had offered to come with me, but I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. I parked my car in its usual spot under the oak tree and walked up the steps of my porch. The key felt heavy in my hand. It slid into the lock with a familiar click. The house was empty, but it was not quiet. Silence has a sound when it's full of things that have been left unsaid. It hums. It presses in on you. They had taken their things, but they had left their mess behind. A sofa cushion was on the floor. A dirty glass sat on the mantelpiece, leaving a sticky ring. The whole house had a stale, sour smell, the smell of strangers. For a long time, I just stood in the living room, letting the silence wash over me. I walked from room to room. I saw the indentations on the carpet where the air mattresses had been. I saw the empty space in the hallway where a picture of Marcus as a boy used to hang. I wondered if they had taken it, or just knocked it down. I could have called a cleaning service. It would have been the easy thing to do, but I knew I couldn't. I needed to do this myself. I needed to reclaim my home, not just with a court order, but with my own 2 hands. So I began. I opened all the windows, letting the clean, salty air chase the strange smells out. Then, I went to the kitchen and filled a bucket with warm water and pine salt. The sharp, clean scent of pine was the first step. I started with the floors. On my hands and knees, with a simple rag, I wiped away the dirt, the scuff marks, the footprints of people who did not belong here. With every swipe of the rag, it felt like I was wiping away a piece of the ugliness. The work was slow, methodical. My back ached, but it was a good ache, an honest ache. Each object I touched held a memory. I picked up the sofa cushion and remembered Marcus and his father wrestling on it, their laughter filling the room. I polished the mantelpiece, erasing the sticky ring, and remembered James placing a seashell there, the very first one we found on this beach together. This was more than just cleaning. It was a ritual, a baptism. I was washing away the anger of the humiliation and making space for peace again. The next day, I tackled the attic. It was dusty and worn, full of boxes that held pieces of our lives. I was looking for old photo albums, but my hand brushed against a heavy metal box tucked away in a corner. It was James's old document box. I hadn't opened it in years. I lifted the lid. Inside were old tax returns, car titles, and a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out. My fingers trembled slightly as I undid the clasp. Inside, yellowed with age, was his life insurance policy. And there, clipped to the front, was a handwritten note in his familiar, looping script. It said, "For our dream, Imani. Finish it." And behind it, the bank statements, the transfer of funds into my account after he passed. The exact amount Marcus had mentioned. He was right. I had forgotten. Not out of malice. Not to make my story better. I had simply forgotten. The memory was gone, erased by time and grief, buried under 20 years of paying the bills and mowing the lawn and being the strong one. I sat there, on the dusty floor of my attic, with the papers in my lap, and for the first time since that horrible Friday, I cried. Not tears of anger, not tears of humiliation, tears of acceptance, for the truth of the house, and for the truth of my own mind. That evening, after the house was clean and shining, I sat on my porch and watched the tide come in. I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Sarah. My oldest friend. We had been nurses together, mothers together, and now, widows together. She answered on the second ring. Imani, is everything all right? Honey. I took a deep breath. The sea air felt cool on my face. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, but quiet. I think my memory is having some trouble. Saying the words out loud didn't feel like a defeat. It felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. It was the first step, not to fighting a war, but to making peace with myself. New choices. The months that followed were quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange and altered landscape. The world did not go back to the way it was. It couldn't. Instead, I began to build something new on the wreckage. The first choice I made was for myself. I walked into Dr. Evans' office, my back straight, my purse clutched in my hand. He was a kind man, a neurologist my family doctor had recommended. I told him everything, not just about the forgotten bills and the misplaced keys, but about the fear that had lived in a secret, dark corner of my mind for years. The fear of becoming my mother. He listened. He ran tests. He asked questions. At the end of it all, he looked at me over his glasses. His expression gentle. Imani, he said, you are not your mother. You do not have dementia. What you have is called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. It means your memory is not what it used to be. It's a challenge. It is not a sentence. A challenge. Not a sentence. Those words became my new mantra. I did not crumble. I did not cry. I was a nurse. I knew what to do with a diagnosis. You face it. You learn about it. You create a plan of care. So I did. I enrolled in a memory workshop at the senior center. I learned little tricks, like making lists and putting my keys in the same bowl every single time I came home. I started doing crossword puzzles again, feeling the old connections in my brain spark back to life. I joined a support group, sitting in a circle with other men and women, sharing our small victories and frustrations. It was a balm to my soul. I was not alone. The second choice I made was about the house that had started all of this. For a while, I thought about selling it, wiping the slate clean, but that felt like running away. That house was not just a source of pain, it was a source of pride. It was James's legacy, and it was mine. So I called my lawyer, David Chen. But this time, it wasn't for a fight. It was to build something, together. We created a trust, the Washington Family Trust. I put the beach house into it. I wrote out the rules, clear as day. The house was to be preserved for the use of my children, my grandchildren, and their children to come. A neutral trustee, the bank, would manage the scheduling and the upkeep. There would be no more arguments about who could use it, or when. It was no longer Times my Times house, or Times his Times house. It was Times our Times legacy, a shared place, protected, for everyone. While I was building my new life, the old one was being dismantled by the slow, grinding wheels of the law. David kept me informed. Tasha, for the crime of forging a medical document, I received 2 years of probation and was ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. I heard she was serving them at a local nursing home. I wondered what she was learning. Marcus, because he had come forward, because he had confessed, received a lighter sentence, a heavy fine, and he was ordered by the court to attend a series of classes on elder care and family counseling. His marriage to Tasha, I heard through the grapevine of old friends, was hanging by a thread. The secrets and the lies had corroded it from the inside out. One Saturday afternoon, About 6 months after that terrible night in the rain, he came to see me. I was at the beach house, sitting on the porch, watching the tide come in. He didn't park in the driveway. He parked on the street and walked up, as if he were a visitor. He looked different, thinner. The arrogance was gone from his shoulders. He just looked tired. He didn't bring flowers or gifts. He just stood at the bottom of the step. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." The words would have felt too small. Instead, he said, "I finished my classes, Mom, and I started seeing a therapist. I'm learning how to talk and how to listen." I looked at him, my son, the man I had raised, the man who had wounded me so deeply. The anger was gone. The raw pain had faded to a dull ache, like an old injury that acts up when the weather changes. All I felt was a profound sadness for all the time we had lost, for all the words that should have been said, and all the actions that should never have been done. I nodded, slowly. "I'm learning too, Marcus," I said, my voice quiet against the sound of the waves. "I'm learning how to live better." There was no hug. There was no easy forgiveness. It was not the end of a movie. It was just a beginning, an acknowledgement that we were two separate people, both broken, both trying to put the pieces of our lives back together. He stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away, and I let him go. Sunset on the water. It has been a year now, 12 months, 4 seasons. Each has come and gone, leaving its quiet mark on the world and on me. The summer heat, once so oppressive, has softened into the gentle, golden light of autumn. I am sitting here on my porch, in my favorite wicker chair, the one with the cushion I restuffed myself. A steaming cup of chamomile tea warms the palms of my hands. Its scent, a mix of apple and earth, mingles with the sweet perfume of the magnolia tree in the yard. The tree is heavy with blossoms, each white petal a perfect, silent bell. The sun is beginning its slow, graceful descent over the water. It is a spectacle I have watched 1,000 times, yet it never fails to hold me. It paints the sky in strokes of soft peach and fiery orange, bleeding into shades of lavender and a deep, tranquil purple. There was a time I used to think of sunsets as a kind of sadness, the day dying, a closing, a reminder that all things, no matter how bright, must come to an end. But I don't see them that way anymore. Now, I see them as a promise that even after the harshest light of day has faded, there is still an incredible, breathtaking beauty. There is still peace. My life is different now. It is quieter. The world has shrunk, in some ways, but the space inside me has grown larger. The legal papers are all filed away. The trust I established now manages the house, not as my fortress, but as a true family legacy. My grandchildren's laughter filled these rooms for 2 weeks in July. I taught my granddaughter how to bake my sweet potato pie, her small hands covered in flour. I watched my grandson, so much like Marcus at that age, build a sandcastle on the very spot where his father once did the same. They were good sounds, healing sounds. I have my routines. Doctor's appointments on Tuesdays. Memory exercises every morning with my breakfast crossword puzzles and lists I make myself remember. On Thursdays, I walk on the beach with Sarah and the other women I call my sisters. We are a small flock of older women. Our steps slower than they once were, but our laughter is just as loud. We talk about our gardens, our ailments, our memories, our children. We share the unspoken truths of aging. And in that sharing, the burden is made lighter. I live a smaller life, perhaps, a life less grand than the one I thought I was building. But it is a life that is truly, completely my own. I don't hold on to bitterness anymore. I tried. For a while, it felt like a righteous thing to do. But bitterness is a heavy coat to wear in the southern heat. It weighs you down. It smothers you. Bitterness, I've learned, is a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die. I am a nurse. I know better than to drink poison. What I have now, in its place, is understanding. It didn't arrive in a flash of light. It seeped in slowly, quietly, like the tide rising over the sand. It is a quiet, deep understanding that has settled in my bones, as steady and sure as the rhythm of the waves against the shore. And in this quiet, I have found lessons, not the kind you learn in a book, but the kind that are etched into your heart. I've learned that as parent, the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't a house or a bank account. It's the truth of our own limits. For so many years, I thought my strength was my greatest asset, my shield. I thought I had to be the unshakable oak tree for my son to lean on, the one who never wavered, never faltered. But an oak tree that never learns to bend with the wind will one day be broken by the storm. True strength isn't about never being weak. It is about having the profound courage to show your children your crack, your fading places, your forgotten names. It's allowing them to love all of you, the strong woman who built a house, and the aging woman who sometimes forgets where she put her keys, not just the perfect, invincible picture you tried so hard to paint for them. And I hope, with all my heart, that Marcus and all the sons and daughters listening out there will learn their own lesson from my story. I hope they learn that you must never, ever use love as an excuse to take away another person's dignity. Fear can make you do terrible things. I know that now. I have seen its work up close. But the silence born of that fear is a crueler weapon than the harshest truth. You must find the courage to speak, to say the hard words, to listen to the hard answers. You must sit in the discomfort together, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because the pain of truth can heal. The wound of silence only festers. And perhaps the biggest lesson of all is not about family, but about this world we all live in. A world that worships at the altar of youth and strength. A world that makes us so terrified of getting old, of becoming irrelevant, of being forgotten, that we start to hide our own aging even from ourselves. We see every wrinkle as a failure, every forgotten name as a final defeat. But I am here, sitting on my porch, 72 years old, to tell you this. In the quiet spaces of my sometimes failing memory, I have found a profound wisdom. In the loss of what I thought my family was, I have found a new and unexpected freedom. And in the deep, abiding silence of this sunset, I have found myself again. The sun touches the horizon now, a perfect, molten orb of fire. It bleeds its glorious color across the water, turning the waves to liquid gold. The show is nearly over. There is no applause. There is no grand finale. It is just a quiet, magnificent ending, a promise of rest, a promise of a new dawn. My name is Imani, Washington, and this is my house. So, the door to Imani's house is finally at peace. But the questions her story raises are just beginning. Was Imani's quiet acceptance true strength? Or should she have demanded more from her son? What does it truly mean to forgive when the wound is so deep? This is where the conversations start. Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments. I'm listening. If this story sparked a debate in your own mind, show your support with a like and share it to start a conversation with others. And to make sure you're here for the next challenging story, be sure to subscribe to Deep Who Cater Stories. I'll see you next time when we'll peel back the layers of another life.